Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I got a long voiceover to do about the so-called truth community, but just truth in general. I'm going to talk about it in a way I haven't talked about before. I want to lead into that with this this bizarre interview with James Franco. There's a thing that Elon Musk said about woke culture, and I got a Magoo Gaff to get to. But let's just start here with Britney. Britney Spears' brother controls her friendships on 04 tour, dancer claims. And so I didn't know she had a brother, but apparently he was her handler and wouldn't let her go out and just was very controlling. There's a long post on Instagram from Britney's, one of her backup dancers. So, more Britney drama. But one of my viewers sent me this. I get more Britney stuff sent to me than anything else. I got about 20, 30 different people, maybe even more, that send me Britney stuff regularly. I don't always get to it. This isn't Britney dancing. We're used to seeing her dance and spin, right? This is Britney killing a cat. I mean, this is Britney singing. It just sounds like she's killing a cat. So, here it go. Yeah, and it gets worse from here. It's amazing how she can sound like a baby and a banshee, like a toddler and a banshee at the same time. It's quite a talent. Kazowie. So that was horrific. And her boyfriend, who's got a check mark, I effing love this so much. Miley Cyrus, I don't know what she did. Voice of Bible. I guess Miley might think this is great because she has, well, I guess she's obviously a better singer than that. I love you, but hell, Jesus Queen, my audio was full blasted in public. Ha 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 ha. New song. She might have just cured us of Omnicrom. Me when someone steps on my toe while in line for Pizza Hut. This just extended our lives. Beautiful voice. Please keep sharing your beautiful gift and soulful voice with the world. This seems to be a famous person. These all have check marks next to their names, so I don't know who they are, but most of these people are lying to her because that was awful. And I'm sure some of you Britney fans will tell me how great that was, but, come on. Be honest. So Elon Musk did an interview, and he talked about woke culture.
Like, wokeness basically wants to make comedy illegal, which is not cool.
We've experienced.
It's not cool. Exactly, Elon. You're cool, but making comedy illegal is uncool. And wokeness wants to make comedy, they don't want people to laugh anymore because they're woke.
At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a reason, it gives them a shield to be mean and cruel.
Mm. So I don't know. I guess I agree with him here. I mean, a lot of what he says I agree with. But the bottom line with wokeness is that people have their beliefs, and it's sucky people, because almost everybody's sucky. Like I said, there's some wonderful people I've met in this world, saintly people, people with incredible internal worlds, which I'm going to talk about later in terms of truth, right? But most people who are condemning other people, I mean, this is also in the truth community, people who want to, they just, they want to see other people taken down, and they just hate other people and hate other people disagreeing with their beliefs. And the woke culture is like the worst of it right now because they have power and, they want to shut down people who disagree with what they think is right, what they think is, just living, good living, right? And if you disagree with them or, this pseudo Hollywood morality that's coming out, they go off, right? They go ballistic because they can't handle your disagreeing with their internal beliefs, like so many other people on the internet, right? But what's hypocritical and, dishonest about it is they suck inside. Who they are inside sucks, right? Isn't like they're saints, isn't like they're good people. They just are into the judgment of other people. And, that's a big part of the truth community as well. Like, you have to fix yourself. You have to work on yourself. That's why I'm like, I do this in a light manner because I don't care about these people. It's between them and God, right? I don't know everything about any of these people, and I have faith in God and that there's a plan and that everything's recorded and they'll get whatever they deserve, and it's not my problem, right? Unless it involves me in some way, and for the most part, it really doesn't. So one of my viewers tipped me off to this.
People just yesterday that we are prepared for what's coming. But 3 days before Christmas, if you look out across the country, you see it everywhere, these long lines, people waiting for hours outside in the cold just to get tested, to be reassured before they spend time with their family. I saw it in Washington today coming to the White House. If you go to the pharmacy, we hear this over and over again, empty shelves, no test kits.
Empty shelves and no test kits. That got Jojo Magoo. I mean, he looks so much like Deliverance Boy here. Like I remember like he was doing something, like a couple years ago. And I was like, hey, he looks like the kid in Deliverance. I made a video on it. And he's like looking like it more and more.
Is that a failure?
No, I don't think it's a failure. I think it's, you could argue that we should have known a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, a month ago.
Wait, which is it, Jojo? We could argue it. And which date? Like when were you irresponsible?
I've ordered 500 million of the pills. 500 million pills. 500 million test kits.
So he was talking about pills back in the beginning of the video, so that's why you got confused. But it happens all the time. He can't remember things. His mind doesn't work as well. And even the way he expresses himself, he often looks lost and confused. He doesn't understand the questions. I mean, he's just, he's not mentally competent, and that's only getting worse. It's not like he's going to get, his brain's going to heal itself. As he gets older, he's going to deteriorate. That's what happens.
That are going to be available to be sent to every home in America if anybody wants them. But the answer is, I wish I had thought about ordering 500 million pills 2 months ago before COVID.
Now he made the mistake again, right? Now he was talking about pills and he made the mistake, and that's understandable. He corrected himself and said, I mean tests, not pills, and he just did it again.
COVID hit here.
But we're nearly 2 years into this pandemic.
Now he doesn't know he even said pills a second time, right? So this is Jojo Magoo. And these guys who slam Trump for not being prepared for COVID and not getting in front of it. And, that came totally out of the blue. And now this thing has happened with Omicron and all the rest of it. And Jojo Magoo. And, we're not out of this thing, this thing that they promised to take care of. I mean, he promised in his presidency, when he was president, he was going to take care of this. And here we are going into 2022, like halfway through his presidency, and things are worse. Economically, they're worse. Everything's worse, right? And so, he's being held accountable by the media a little bit, but not nearly the way they did it to Trump. And I'm not a Trump fan. I'm just talking about the differences here where, it's completely one-sided, right? Where there's different treatment for, different points of view and different people. The right is being treated in a different way than the left, and the woke culture is, being treated better. It has more power than the truth community, right? Like these are polar opposites. And so let's go to James Franco here. So James Franco got Me Too'd, and I showed you all these somber pictures of him on New York Post and Page 6. And then he's, here's a little bit of his fake explanation.
Well, in 2018, there were some complaints about me and an article about me. And at that moment, I just thought, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to pause. Did not seem like the right time to say anything. There were people that were upset with me, and I needed to listen.
He needed to listen. Like, this is just really fake, right? And I'll explain, I want to go through the video and then I can talk more easily when I'm just doing the voiceover on the other side. But it's just so fake, right? Because he was thinking about saving his career like all these other guys, right? And there's multiple ways that you can tell. But the first way is he's being somber. Look at how somber he is.
When something like this happens, like the natural human instinct is to just make it stop. You just want to get out in front of it and whatever you have to do.
We're looking at you, Alec Baldwin.
You apologize, get it done. But what that doesn't do is allow you to do the work to...
He's got to do the work. Like, this is Hollywood speak, liberal speak, psychological speak. That he had to do the work. Like, this thing happened, and he knew he had to do the work. Like, this is all, handcrafted to appeal to his, Hollywood buddies and, show that he's changed.
And to look at what was underneath, like whatever you did, even if it was a gaffe or you said something wrong or whatever, there's probably an iceberg underneath.
It's an iceberg. He had to get to the iceberg. The iceberg's down there.
That of behavior, of patterning, of just being blind to yourself that isn't going to just be solved overnight. So I've just been doing a lot of work. And
see, he's very somber because, he's doing a mea culpa moment here. But if he was actually, his soul was burdened, he would feel relieved, right? He would be happy. He would be glowing. He'd be like, oh, man, if you transform internally, when you have something cleaned out of you in the heartfulness system, like I had a bitterness towards God, samskara in my system. I've talked about this in many of my videos. Like a deep anger and bitterness towards God. Like I didn't even know what it was. I just was carrying it around with me. And then it was brought to the surface and I figured it out, and it was, a past life thing. And the difference of what my face looked like, I mean, I don't know, but I know without like seeing it, would be, in terms of having like a glow or having, some like effervescence post having that cleaned, like the unburdening, the relief of it, right? But these guys all feel like they have to act, a way like they're somber, and, the way his voice is and the way he's talking, communicating, they feel like they have to act that way because, that's what's expected. So it isn't like there's been relief, like he's done the work. If he did the work, there would be some joy. There would be some excitement about it, right? But now because of these women and these, all these people being a womanizer, right? He has to act like, oh, I'm so sad, so sorry, I'm such a piece of crap and all these things, Gollum-like, and be all somber instead of just, like being natural and authentic.
I was in recovery before, for substance abuse. And there were some issues that I had to deal with that were also related to addiction. And so I've really used my...
Then there's this long list of all he's got wrong with him inside himself, which, this is like the Tiger Woods thing, or when Tiger Woods had to make his apology. They're just doing this to save their career. They're not doing it because he felt bad about it all along. Because if you feel bad about something and you're caught finally, it's a relief, right? If you feel guilty, you feel shamed, you feel whatever, negativity. When you're finally caught, it feels great. You're unburdened. There might be some consequences, things like that suck. You're scared of it. But at least there's this release. Like you've been carrying this guilt and shame and all these things around with you. And so there's like relief. But when they do these Hollywood apologies or political apologies, they want to see shame and remorse in an acting way. But if the guy really had changed, you would see it in the person's face and they could talk about it in a different way, like what a gift it was, right? And how they became a better person. I'm sure he'll try some of that at the end of the interview. But right now he's trying to show solace and, concern and it's all just really fake. So I've known this about truth, like just how people relate to truth, why some people are like serial liars and really get into it, and why some people lie but they don't like to. And, knowing what kind of person you are in terms of changing your character and, going with, being congruent with what's inside of you, like in your internal world, right? There was someone that called me a deceiver in a comment the other day, right? Which, I mocked and found humorous. And I said, what, you're not? Like, who isn't deceptive at one time in their life or another? Who hasn't lied, right? You never told a lie, right? Come on, that's all these people who are, judgmental, and they're telling lies. They're living a lie. They're lying to themselves, deceiving themselves, which is the worst thing. The worst thing, according to Babaji, the second master of the heartfulness system, was when a person lies to themselves. But in terms of what I'm talking about here, there's basically two groups of people, but there's a wide range of this behavior, and it's not behavior, it's what's inside of you, the kind of person you are, the kind of character you have, right? And that is people who actually like lying, like the power they get from lying. And that doesn't mean just lying. It means being deceptive. It's about being manipulative, right? All of these things. And other people, when they lie, they feel guilt and remorse. They feel, bad about it, right? It weakens them, right? It's not congruent for them to do that. And it makes them, it's like they want to get caught, or they're going to hurt themselves. They're going to do something, maybe not intentionally hurt themselves, but they're going to do something that causes them to suffer, right? And a lot of times these people, because of their job, because of their, families, because of, whatever, it's friends, they're forced to lie, and it, doesn't feel good to them, right? It makes them feel bad, but they, they feel like they're supposed to. It's a weird thing, but, people feel like they're supposed to lie all the time. And it just sort of like wears you down. And so I have a few examples of people that I knew, in my past who were very, into lying. They had some huge character flaws. And, how it affected me, like some of these people negatively affected me. And, it's what you have inside of you. So one of my old roommates was sort of, he was kind of a real scumbag, was always cheating on his girlfriends. I got a couple of these friends who were like this, right? I had friends who were just happy, being in a relationship and didn't want drama, anti-drama, anti-deception. And they were just, faithful and, loyal. And then there was, probably another half of my friends who were like cheaters, serial cheaters, whatever it was, right? But this guy, there was something else going on. He was really effed up. And so he was dating a dog groomer, right? And he was at her class. She was teaching a class, and there was a girl that he saw that he liked was one of her students. And he goes up to the girl and starts hitting on her, right? And the girl knows that he's dating her teacher and her instructor. And the girl walks right away from him and goes right up to the teacher and says, "Your boyfriend just hit on me," right? His girlfriend was in another room. So the girl just walks in the other room, and his girlfriend comes back out, right? And he's telling me this story, and he goes, so she's confronting me. She's telling me, what the girl told her. And my wheels start spinning. He gets really happy. He gets really congruent. And I'm looking at him like, oh, man, you're like effed up. He goes, and I'm just like thinking about how I'm going to lie my way out of this. And he said, I remembered that my girlfriend had chastised this girl like a little while earlier. And he goes, yeah, you hurt that girl's feelings when you chastised her, and she's just saying that to get back at you, right? Like he made up this whole, gaslighting, reality. And he's like, man, it was so great. And she starts believing me, and he's like feeling all powerful. And more than, the sexual pleasure, he was into controlling people and being able to lie to them and manipulate them. Like I saw it over and over again, but this is where I really saw it. I'm like, dude, you're effed up, right? Like that's his internal world. And you really don't know what's going on inside of people. Like I've said this before, in the Heartfulness meditation, you read somebody's inner condition, but that's on a spiritual level. In a psychological assessment, which I did as a counselor, you get a, sort of a peek into somebody's internal world But when you know people, every once in a while they reveal something to you, and you're like, wow, that's how it is inside of you. Like that's like you really like to lie and manipulate people in this way and control them. And when you can get people to bend to your will with your deceptive capabilities, you feel powerful. You feel good. It's like it's something that makes you feel, I don't know, whole or something, right? Like how twisted is that? This drama, like people who live for drama and create these circumstances, right? Like he said, he was nervous at first when his girlfriend confronted him, but then he it was like the adrenaline started pumping and the lies started coming into the lie, the deception started to be formed, and when I was hearing it, I'm like, this is a nightmare for me. Everything that you just described is a nightmare, right? I had another friend, my best friend from high school, who ended up moving to Atlanta. And years later, I moved down there. And he was dating this girl, and she was like, beautiful girl. She had like flaming red hair and very fiery, right? Very opinionated, very fiery. And she didn't like to be cheated on. When I first met her, I didn't like her. Like, we didn't like each other. There was just, friction. We were living together, right? And there was a time where she was driving someplace and I was with her, and she, went to like, it was a convenience store, and, her parents were alcoholics or something maybe. And there was some alcoholic homeless guy there. And she went in and bought him like some food and orange juice and put it next to him. He was like sleeping, And, I thought, wow, that was kind of a nice thing. And, we ended up becoming friends. And my roommate was another serial cheater. I was waiting tables, and he brought the girl he was dating into the restaurant I was working at, right? And, all that stuff always makes me uncomfortable, right? And I was now friends with this, his girlfriend, and she knew I didn't like to lie, right? And she would grill me, like she could just tell, like, and then she ended up moving out, but they were still sort of in the breaking up process. I mean, there was a time where, like, she went to his wallet and found a girl's phone number in his wallet, and he was taking a shower, and he opened the shower curtain, and she's standing like an inch away, and she like shoved the number in his face. Right. Eventually, he ended up hooking up with a girl at work, and she waited in the parking lot all night for him to come home. Like, he was at the girl's house, and we got out of the car. She maced both of them. Right. So it ended up, getting really south, going really south. But she would grill me, and I would feel bad. It was like my stomach would get into knots, and I was like, why am I even talking to you, right? Like, this has nothing to do with me. But my friend expected me to lie for him. There's some sort of like bro code that if a guy is cheating on his, girlfriend or wife, he's your friend, you're supposed to cover for him. And I wouldn't do that now, right? I've learned that, it stresses me out. Like, it isn't that he's just cheating on his girlfriend or wife. He's, screwing me over, and I mean, this is part of the dysfunctional dynamics. But this girl herself, she also waited tables, and she worked a Sunday brunch at this really fancy restaurant, and she would, there was a way where you could pocket the money from the brunch, and she would steal about $200 every Sunday, right? And she didn't have a problem with that, screwing over a restaurant and, committing a crime, but she didn't like her, man lying to her. And this is, the way people are, right? Both things make me stressed out. Like, if I was, stealing money from a restaurant like that, I would, feel guilty and stressed out. I'm going to get caught. I would feel weak, right? It doesn't, sit with me. It's not something that, is going to make me feel congruent. It's going to, make me feel divided, all these things, right? And people need to know this about themselves. People who really are honest. Because a lot of people, they have problems with other people lying or other people stealing, but they're willing to do it themselves, right? My brother was like a serial cheater. And I lived with my brother, his wife, and his 3 kids when I was in college for about a year, and we were always close. And, he was so much older than me. It was like almost like having a second family, and always grateful for his wife. I was staying there and stuff, and she didn't, have a problem with it. So we were, friends or whatever it is. And, I started my own landscaping business, and I had a female customer. I was like 21, 22, 20, whatever it was, right? I was in my 20s. She was in her 30s. And my brother had slept with her, but I never thought he was cheating, right? Like, I just wouldn't have believed it. It wasn't something it made total sense afterwards. Like I'd seen some things that I didn't really think about, right? And so, I went and the woman said, "Oh, I know your brother." And I said, "Oh." And so I saw my brother, like a couple days later. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I got a customer over here. There's this woman." I said her name, and she knows you. And he bit my head off, right? He just snaps at me for no reason, right? Because his wife was in the house or whatever it was. But I didn't understand it at the time. But then he ended up leaving his wife for another woman. He told me about all these girlfriends he had, and over the years, he was a serial cheater, right? But he was mad at me because I had a much higher opinion of him than he actually was, right? Because I never would have ever assumed that he was, lying to his wife. And this woman was sort of, skanky. Just, and so, he bit my head off because I was putting his lies in jeopardy. He asked me if had I got any new customers. I was like, yeah, there's a woman over here, named whatever her name was, and she says she knows you, right? Because that's what she said. She didn't say she was banging him, right? I didn't know. I'm completely innocent, but he got all whatever his guilt and shame and covering up his lies and all this stuff, right? And so years later, when I figured out he was telling me about this thing, I said, "Hey, you remember this woman?" He goes, "Yeah, you almost got me in trouble." I'm like, "Yeah, but I didn't almost get you in trouble. You were a lying, cheating scumbag." I didn't, I'm just supposed to assume some, mafioso, low life that, all my friends and, whatever they are, my older brother who, had been married for years, right? He'd been married for 15, 20 years by then. I don't know what it was. And, that he was a serial cheater, right? I had a higher opinion of him. I thought he was better than he was. But anyways, going back to the original story about this guy who really got off online, I dated a girl who was really messed up. Her family was a family of alcoholics from South Carolina. This is when I was also living in Georgia. And, her dad drove a truck. He was kind of a fun guy, but they were, they'd start drinking 10, 11 o'clock. He was an old guy, bald and, he was probably in his 40s or 50s, must be, he was around my age now, at least physically. And they had suffered a family tragedy where they had an older brother who was kind of crazy and acting out. And they had a sister, she was maybe the second oldest or the third oldest. And the girl I was dating was the second youngest, right? And her older sister was sort of the gem of the family. She was, much smaller than everyone else in the family. And she was just sort of loved and, one of the people that was the glue of the family. And her older brother was driving home and, maybe he was a little bit drunk and, he was driving too fast and the car swerved and hit a tree. And then the girl died, the sister died. And, the whole family never really got over it. The brother came to the back door they were watching TV and they were sort of drinking or whatever, at least her dad and mom were. And, he was covered in glass, right, from the car. And he had to say, she's dead, right? And I think she did some jail time. But anyways, it was just a messed up family. Her younger brother came to work at the restaurant where we were working. He brought his girlfriend, from South Carolina. He had waited tables somewhere over there. And they were just really messed up. Before her brother moved down, we went camping with her dad and his girlfriend, at this lake. And, they were all drinking when it was, it was just, constantly being drunk, and it's something that never really worked for me, right? I never had, a love for alcohol or any of these things. I want to talk about that, more later in this voiceover. But I remember this, we drove all night. We worked, till 11 o'clock. And then we drove from Atlanta to Kentucky where there's this Lake Cumberland. It's out in the woods. It's a spring-fed lake, beautiful place, right? And, we got there, I don't know what time. Maybe we, had a few drinks. I don't think I got any sleep at all, right? And her dad had a little dinghy, a small boat. And it had his dead daughter's name on it. So it was a constant, There's a couple of stories with the boat. I'll tell you the other one. I think I've told these stories before. And so we go out and we're riding in the lake, and the lake is spring fed. It's really hot there, but the lake is cool, like beautiful, clear lake. Sometimes lakes are very dirty and, the water just sits there, but it's being fed by a spring. It was a big lake. The water was really clear, but it was a little bit chilly. It was cold because of the, coming up from, never got too warm or whatever because it's coming up from, underneath the earth, right underneath the lake. It's being fed by spring water. And so we're in the boat, and there's a big sort of cliff, like some rocks sticking out of, the middle of the lake somewhere, right? A deep part of the lake, there just happens to be some rock formation. And we're going over to it, and he goes, my daughter told me you like to cliff dive. And it's like I'm like half asleep and dead. And I'm like, what? There were times me and my friends in high school went and dove off of some, not dove, but jumped off of some, high, whatever it was. One place was a river. There was some other place we had done this, right? And I didn't like it because you couldn't see what was underneath the water. And, there's horror stories of people, hitting something. Unless you know what you're doing. These were places that people regularly did it. But I didn't like it because water hurts. When you go off a high dive and you miss or whatever, I wasn't into it. I'm not a thrill seeker, and I certainly wasn't bragging. Like, what probably happened was I was talking to this girl. At some point, she brought up something to do with cliff diving, and I said, yeah, I did that once. Like, like I don't even remember the conversation, but somehow she knew that I did it, and they're both looking at me like, I have to go do it again. And I'm like, you kidding me? Like, you're putting me on the spot like this, right? Like, like I look like a liar or a wuss if I don't go do it. And I didn't know how. I guess the guy, her dad, was kind of manipulative too. But she was so manipulative, which I didn't know then, right? And they're both looking at me like, yeah, you got to go do this, right? So I get out of the boat, and I jump in the water. It's like cold, and I'm tired, and I swim over. I'm like exhausted already, right? I've like no sleep. And I climb up the top of it, right? And I could see down. I'm like, well, there's, it's clear going, right? But I'm like, And so I wanted to be impressive, which was stupid. Like, I wouldn't, I would, like, if it was me now, I'd be like, F you. Like, no. I didn't say I liked to cliff dive. I said I did it. I ain't doing it, right? But this was back when I was younger and, stupider, when I was a dummy and didn't know I could say, like, I was put on the spot. I was just like, no, don't put me on the spot. Like, are you asking me if I want to cliff dive? The answer is no, I don't. Are you saying, like, if I don't do it, I'm a liar and, a coward? Like, and so I'm on top of the cliff, and the best way to do it, would be to go down and feet first with my arms in. Like, you don't really ever want to go head first, especially if you're not sure what's there, right? And I'm not giving advice about cliff diving because I'm fully against it. No reason to do it. Like I said, I'm not a thrill seeker. But, this was an alcoholic disaster family. And so I'm up on the cliff, and I'm like, some part of me wanted to be impressive. I don't even know. So I was like, I'm going to do some sort of like swan dive. I wasn't like a good diver, right? I'd done some diving. One of my friends had gone in feet first and had his arms out like in a cross, like being on the cross position. And when his arms hit the water, like his shoulders were messed up, right? Like when you hit the water, you're going with so much velocity and force, even though water seems soft, like you still get hurt from the water, right? And so I got, I'm about to jump, and I'm not clear on whether I want to go feet first or do some sort of, head first dive. And I get caught between them, and I do like a 25-foot frickin' belly flop. Like water slams my nuts, and like my whole body is just like in pain, right? And I'm like doggy paddling back to the boat, right? Like, I was like doomed for failure. And, this girl had sort of set me up, like, with her dad, but I really didn't understand that yet, right? Like it was, it was something that I would have to see like more than once to really understand like how effed up she was internally. And another story to do with the dinghy, which also illustrates how this was a disaster family, was her brother and his girlfriend came to a second time to this lake. And so we met her dad. Like her dad, the first time we were there, we camped up on a hill. He had a camper. He made a lot of money as a truck driver, and he had some sort of a camper. And these kids were walking by with a skateboard. There was a paved driveway up to the campsite, and it was like a steep driveway. And some kids were walking by with a skateboard, and he called them up to the hill. He says, "I want to try it." And I had my friends and I had built a half pipe, and I was like, okay, skateboarder. Like I wasn't as good as my friends, but when I was little, I was like 14, 15 years old, right? And I looked at this hill, and I'm like, when you go on a skateboard, and this wasn't a nice skateboard, you can hit a rock and it can just stop. Like, there's some cracks. And I'm like, I don't think you should do that. And he was like, no, it'll be great. He's drunk too, right? And so he's going down, he gets halfway down, and the skateboard goes out from under him, and he goes flying and lands on his ass, right? I'm like, we're taking him to the hospital. He bounces right back up. But like, this was typical days for this family, right? So the second time, the guy rented a houseboat, and we're on the houseboat, and they're always drinking. He drank this thing called Salty Dog. I don't even remember what it was, right? Some kind of salt on the rim of the glass. I don't know. And, they'd wake up and start drinking at 9, 10 in the morning. Like, and I just wasn't built for that, I mean, this was like, I was, a few years later, I was, going to be completely free of any sort of alcohol and drugs. Like, it never really suited me. I'll talk about that in a moment. And so the guy had some fireworks, and it was pretty late. It's dark out, and he wants to light off the fireworks. And I'm not even aware what's going on. And so his son takes the dinghy with his, dead daughter's name on the back of the boat and brings him over to the side, which is, a steep hill filled with like clay and rocks. There's a couple rocks jutting out onto, into the water. And he's standing on these rocks with fireworks. And, when his son drove him over, he was like, oh, the boat's almost out of gas. So his son, who's drunk, starts filling the dinghy with gas. And the guy starts lighting off these like fireworks, and they're going everywhere. And one of them lands in the boat. His son dives into the water before the gas catches on fire. I'm like, holy shit. This is like a disaster family, right? Like, it's just one thing after another with these guys. But anyways, I just wanted to give like this sort of, like a kind of understanding about the family dynamics, because I got a front row seat to it. And so I worked with this girl, we ended up being in the process of breaking up there, and she was like a total nightmare about it, right? But two of our coworkers, there was this guy who was like 6'5". So I'm probably 24, 25. He was in his 30s. He was 35, and he looked like this character animal from the Muppets, right? He had long hair, long goatee and mustache, and he was kind of a little bit wild. Like, I told some stories about him. Like, one time he you had to carry things like, water, wine, or in this case, cappuccinos with a small tray, right? You'd have the small tray, and then you'd take the whatever you're serving to the customer off the tray. But he didn't like to use them. And so he took 4 cappuccinos in these glass mugs, 2 in each hand, over to the table. And, I see him go in there, and I'm like, he's really hustling. Like, looks like he's in pain or something. And he puts them down on the table, and he goes, "Yeah, those are hot." Right to the customers. Like, he did, like, he was like kind of a, he was psychologically messed up. And he dated this girl named Tiffany. Like, I remember her name just because of it just suited her. And she was like 5 feet. So he's like 6'5", and she's like 5 feet. And she had a really high voice like this. And it had a southern accent. Like, I don't think I can do both of those, right? He was like from Chicago, and she was like from Tennessee. And they were, a bizarre couple. Like, one time she's just like yelling at the guy and just, telling him like what a piece of crap he is. Right? We're all sitting up there, like, at the end of the shift, there was these tables where we would sit up, and you would roll silverware. Like, you had to, prep the dining room for, the next shift. And we're all doing this side work, and she's just yelling at him. And he's like, okay, are you done? Read me the riot act. What are we going to do now? And she goes, let's go home and you can F my brains out. Like, I'm quoting her verbatim, except she didn't say F, right? So they were like a weird couple. Weird in themselves, right? But also weird with each other. And one time he, was talking about some women in the restaurant, and I told my, ex-girlfriend about this just because they were like a joke, right? And she said, oh, wow, you got so much power over them. I said, what? What are you talking about? She was like, well, you could break that little girl's heart if you told her, or you could, sort of blackmail him with the information. And I'm like, I'm not going to do either of those things, right? Like, it's none of my business, and, like, I don't think that way. And I looked at her, I'm like, oh, my God, you're effed up. But, later on or sometime before that, around that time, she had told me that this movie, Dangerous Liaisons, it's a famous, it's based in some, famous book or whatever it is. It's about this, the French elite, the French aristocracy. And Glenn Close won like some Academy Award for it. And she plays this woman who just wrecks all these people's lives and manipulates them, and she just grows in her power. And this girl, my ex-girlfriend, describes this scene at the end of the movie. I ended up seeing the movie. It's not well acted, John Malkovich, and it's a horrible movie. Like, I later saw it, and I realized how effed up she was. And she's wrecked all these people's lives, and they're going to some fancy party, and she has this, white-faced, powdery makeup. They used to put this, this sort of powder, makeup, and she's walking with such like arrogance and pride through all these people who hate her because she's manipulated each of them and wrecked their lives and, had people's hearts broken and all these things, right? And she's going, that kind of power, like I would love to be that kind of a woman, right? And I saw this play out in our relationship, and she'd like to be able to, hurt other people. Like, she fed off the pain, right? It made her feel powerful. And like, the first story I told about my old roommate who, was getting off on lying to his girlfriend, right? So I had some experiences like this with people who are, chronic deceivers that, they have something twisted or wrong with them inside where they feel stronger when they lie and cheat. They feel stronger when they manipulate people, when they control other people. They can deceive other people, hurt other people, whatever it is, right? They have this in their internal world, and it's congruent to them, right? It makes them feel like, yeah, this is right. This is how it should be. Like I said, they feel stronger. And I, saw in myself that whenever I engaged in any of these types of behaviors, it made me feel bad and weak, right? It weakened me. It made me like diminish. It's like, I wasn't as alive, right? I was, conflicted, feeling guilt. And I mean, even if I wasn't doing anything, I was just, witnessing, or expected to cover for somebody who was lying or whatever it was. Like, it just wore me down, right? It made me have like butterflies in my stomach, made me feel, bad, right? Like, I just don't do well with it at all. And, there were some other things that I was thinking about. Like, when I was a little kid, I talked about this in one of my Journey series videos. There was a pharmacy, down a couple blocks away from my house. My parents would give me, 25 cents, a quarter or something like this, or I had some change or I had like $1 of money from my birthday. And back then you could get like 3 things or 5 things of candy. Sometimes they were nickel a piece. Some things were even a penny, like, bubble gum. And, I could get a whole bunch of candy. Just like when you would get candy at Halloween or Easter. But I found that, like, when I ate too much candy, it made me feel sick, right? I just didn't feel good. And so oftentimes I wouldn't even get it, right? Like, I liked the candy, but if I ate too much of it, it would make me feel sick, and oftentimes I didn't care about it, right? And this later played out when I did alcohol and drugs, and when I wanted to stop, it wasn't a big deal. Like, I didn't really enjoy drinking. There wasn't, a history of alcoholism. And so those things were easy for me, right? It's always been easy for me to quit something, to give something up. I don't have those addictive samskaras. And those things, I came in with, right? Like, some part of me, as a soul, had learned these things in a previous existence, and I'd had an aversion to them. Having a negative reaction to lying and some of these other negative behaviors and, some of these addictive behaviors. And I don't, look at those things like I, earned that, certainly not in this life, like I was born with it. So I don't, pat myself on the back for it. There's been other things that I had to overcome, that I had to, work through and get cleaned out. And these things, like I said, the bitterness towards God, some of these other things that I really had to push through and go through, that made me a better person, build my character. Like those things I worked for, right? Like everybody has to change and evolve. But, I came in with some of these other tendencies that, were already there. Like they were just gifts that I had. I wasn't, brought down the negative path that so many people go down, in terms of being a, serial liar and just all the drama they have, all these things, right? And then it always ends the same way. Like, this disaster family I was talking about, and I had heard all these stories, from my ex-girlfriend about her family, just all of it, right? And they were constantly in a state of crisis and drama, the alcohol and there was just the deception and the manipulation and everything that goes with it played a huge part in that. But you can see with James Franco and Alec Baldwin and so many other these, guys, I said about the Tiger Woods thing, all these people that get caught doing something and they want their position back, right? And they have business managers and family members and all these people pressuring them to come out and do one of these interviews or public apologies or whatever it is to, stop the brand damage and maybe turn public perception around. But it's fundamentally dishonest, right? They're lying all the time. Like they are professional deceivers and they don't have a problem with it. They don't, have some conscience because you can't be that good at it. When you talk about all these politicians and, all these people with power and influence, they're all like this, right? Because it's part of the job to be a deceiver. You're supposed to lie to, whoever all the time. You're lying all the time. And if you had any kind of a conscience, like I said, people have, it's a spectrum of liars. Some people are, they're the worst of the worst. Some people, they like to dabble in lying, right? And then you have people with, an internal conscience, what's inside of them, right? I'm talking about what's inside of both people. You can have people who are, for example, like twins, or they're, closely, related genetically in some way, and they look like each other, siblings, and they're nothing alike, right? Like they're completely different. Maybe they have some, some things from their upbringing and their social, situation, but you take twins who have the same parents and who have the same life, right? And they have the same genetics and the same social structure, and yet they're, nothing alike, right? Because of their samskaras, what they brought from, their previous existence, these impressions, what they brought with them in terms of their subtle bodies, the essence of their spirit, and, it forms their ego and their character and things like this. And so there's that element that people don't think about. Work you've done in the past, things that you've gone through that you no longer have to deal with, addictions, being a deceiver, but there are some people who, they just repeat the same mistakes over and over again, life in and life out. And they love the power and, they're just so far gone the demonic pathway that they never, are able to connect with the pure essence of their soul and the part of them that's divine, the best part of themselves, right? The higher nature, their higher nature. And when you go in some sort of demonic path and you lose sight of, any sort of divinity or any sort of, a higher nature, then it just goes, you get worse and worse. And you turn into like more of a demon, from life to life. And you have all these people that are addicted to power, addicted to, the manipulation of other people, getting over on other people. Have you ever seen these movies like The Grifter, The Flim Flam Man, that people just like to win? Like they don't care, how much, they like to deceive other people. They like to, take people. Like it makes them feel strong to take advantage of other people and, get over on them in some way. And that's, all these people that are in power have that, they have that in them, right? And then when they get caught, they do something like James Franco just did. But you can see there's no real remorse. Like they wouldn't be able to do these things if they had a conscience, if they felt bad about them, right? And they always talk about, oh, it's addiction or it's this or that. But it's just that they get off on evil behavior. Once in a while you have a higher developed soul that's down here to play a villainous role because it's necessary for the divine drama. That happens in these epics. But for the most part, these people are just, they've gone down the wrong path and they just don't know how to turn it around. And at this point, they have no desire or compulsion to do it. And so the reason I'm talking about this way is that you have people who are obsessed with punishing these people, right? Like if they did something to you and it affected you directly, sure. But oftentimes it's just things you've heard about them and, it's a part of the show. It might not even be, 100% factually true. But why are you thinking about these people, right? Like they've gone down a dark path and they just, they don't have a good person in them. Like, they have a soul and they have, a divine essence. They have the best version of themselves, buried deep, but you're not going to unlock it. You're not going to change them, right? Like it's something between them and God. They have to figure it out at some point. They have to turn it around, even if it's somebody that's a loved one, somebody that's, a part of your, inner circle, your life, and they're like this. And you're going to have family members like this. You're going to have, bosses or, spouses or siblings or kids or whatever it is, parents, who are going to be like this. And you just can't change them. Like it's stupid to think you can because this is how they're hardwired. And only, some, I don't know, some like big kind of, shift in their existence, some wake-up call. But they usually get wake-up call after wake-up call. Maybe you've had a friend like this and, maybe they're good-natured in one way, but they just never get it together. And it's just, they're just free-falling into the abyss, right? And they just never can turn it around. And, this is not for you to worry about. Like it's like you got to do the best with what you have, right? If you have been gifted with, some of these things I've talked about, like a predisposition to connect to God, a conscience, right? A heart where you can feel your heart, you can feel love. There's lots of these people, they don't feel love, right? They get off on, hurting other people and having power over other people and forcing other people to do their bidding. Like having somebody who, wants to be with you because they love you, like that doesn't do anything for them, right? Having somebody love you, being able to love somebody else and having mutual love and having, a consensual type of, you both want to be with each other and you both want to do things for each other, or lots of people like that in your life where, you want to make the other person happy and they want to make you happy. And you both, you both like are more powerful because of that. You're more, alive, you're more whatever it is. Like these people don't have that. Like taking a, a nice walk in the woods or going to the beach or, going to some, they like to go to nice places because other people want to go there, right? Like they, they don't enjoy the places themselves. They don't get enjoyment out of the simple things, right? Like they got these big yachts that they never go on. They just, yeah, I got this yacht, but it's not like they love going on the yacht. They got these, 12 houses or whatever, right? But they don't enjoy any of them. And they're all in, pristine locations. Beautiful golf courses, but they don't play golf or, they're just, when they do, it's because, other people want to do it, right? Like they're, happy that other people want to do it and they can and they can, right? They're a part of some exclusive club with all these privileges, but they don't enjoy any of it. None of it makes them happy. They're just, they like the evil that, the doing the evil that gives them these privileges. But anyways, like, you have to figure out like what works for you, right? Like you're trying to make it in some, corporation, you're trying to make it in some big, whatever it is, be important, be famous, go to Hollywood, but you got to be one of these evil people to survive that. You either have to turn into one or you have to come in with some of these, tendencies because, it is that's the world you live in. It's a world of venomous creatures that, they don't enjoy the simple things in life. They're not good, pure people. They're all, they're all demons, big ego demons, that get fed through, extracting energy from other people. They can't connect to love, right? They can't do the heartfulness system. It wouldn't appeal to them. They don't want to be in front of God. They don't want to connect to God, right? Because, then they would have to change. Master Chargy once said, rich people don't pray because they could do something about it. If they started praying, they'd realize, they could help people with their money. Just on every level of being a rich person. If you have a heart and you see other people suffering and you could feel their suffering and you could do something about it, then you would be compelled to do something. They want to keep their hearts closed so they can keep all the, wealth that they've accumulated. This hoarders, they're like giant hoarders of wealth, right? And so, everyone should kind of understand what kind of person they are, what they came in with, and what makes them congruent, what makes them feel powerful. Like I said, I always had a problem with lying. I do it if I have to, right? This is even before I did Heartfulness. It was even like a kid. It was like a burden, right? It was something that would make me feel guilty and I just, make me feel miserable. It was like heavy. It's a burden I was carrying around. And then when I started doing Heartfulness, it would just be right there, because when you meditate, there's things inside of you, and if you're distracted by the outside world and you're not looking inwardly, sometimes you don't even know what you feel about things. Like if you feel bad, if you feel remorse, if you feel, guilt or whatever it is, you're not in touch with it because you're, completely focused on the periphery of your life. You're externalized to such an extent, you don't know what's going on inside of you. That's most people. When I started doing the Heartfulness meditation and with the cleaning aspect and their transmission, brings some of these things to the surface and you start realizing things about yourself internally. When I started doing the Journey series, I felt a lot better. I felt relieved because, the Heartfulness system's wonderful. The transmission's wonderful, and, the grassroots nature of the organization is wonderful, and the gatherings are great. I have nothing but positive things to say, and I'm good at seeing things that suck about something, like I'm an expert at it. And, there's so many great things about Heartfulness, wonderful people in it. But then there's the struggles I've had with some part of the organization, and I didn't feel comfortable talking about that, right, to potential new people, because I didn't want to wreck something for people that's so great by, people, gravitating to some of the negative things, stories I said, or whatever it is, right? My brother remarried. He had his, I guess it was his second wife, and, he was having so many problems as caretaker of the ashram. He's kind of negative, and, he was dealing with these people who were kind of tough. And, he told her these stories about what he felt like. And, I asked him, you think she'd ever do Heartfulness? He said, well, not after all the things I've told her, right? And I was like, well, that's not good, right? And my wife is a new person in the system. And I didn't want her to be, negative towards it, right? I didn't want to dwell on just this part of it, so I didn't feel comfortable sharing it with people, new people specifically, because it's not something that they would have to deal with for a while, right? And they would find all the good parts about Heartfulness. Usually you experience the good parts, not always, but usually a person experiences the good parts, and then, they start having some of these issues with other people, and, it's just part of human nature and having something with humans in it, right? But you're already, committed, and you already know how great the system is. But for new people, or potentially new people, that's not the case. But once the YouTube channel started to really suck, and, people started asking me about the UN, some of these other things, then I said, well, I need to say something. And when I, told that part of it, because, my overall, on a spiritual level, my experience with the Heartfulness system is 100% great. Internally, 100% great. In terms of my material life and me as a person, it's about 90% great, right? Or 80% great, I don't even know. And the 20%, is understandable to me, and it's not the purpose of the system. The 20% or the 80% of my, my material interactions aren't, anything to do with what the system offers and delivers, and that's the spiritual part, which has been 100% great for me. No flaws, no mistakes, just perfect in every possible way. But in terms of these other things, they're there. And then once I was compelled to talk about them, I felt just a giant sense of relief, right? It's a burden maybe to have to, to balance everything out and really create a clear picture, but I just do better when I'm able to speak freely. I don't do well when I have to lie or, have to withhold information. I don't like it. Like, it's not, it doesn't suit me as a person. Like, it's going to come out at one point or another. Like, it's just better that, like, don't tell me something and tell me to keep it a secret or whatever it is, right? Like, I'd rather not know it then, I'd rather not experience it or see it, because information should be shared. There was this story about the basketball players, Draymond Green and Nikola Jokic. And Draymond Green went on the TNT show Inside the NBA, and he was like an announcer, sort of like a sports pundit, and he talked about how Nikola Jokic defense sucked, right? He didn't play defense. He was a great offensive player, European player. He comes from Sarajevo or Bosnia or something like that, right? And the article said that Nikola Jokic came up to him and said, I heard what you said, you were right, but I'm, a lot better. And Draymond Green said, yeah, you got a lot better defense. He won the MVP last year, right? Because, no one on his team, the coaches and the other people, weren't able to tell him or were afraid to tell him, you're not trying on defense, right? They didn't want to piss him off or whatever it is, but he needed to hear that, right? Sometimes you need to hear things from people. People don't want to share negative things and don't want to, confront other people, but sometimes you can do it in some other way, right? The information needs to go out there. Plus, when you say it, it goes out into the universe in some way. Like, I don't, believe in leaving negative comments and having arguments with people, like dropping those kind of so-called truth bombs, whatever it is. I talked about that, huge narcissist, Jesse, whatever his name is, talking to his fans or his people about confronting Fauci, right? And he said ambush him and, fire some kill shots in terms of, questions you ask, right? Some people reacted because they like Fox News, but the behavior's, not good. You don't want to encourage that kind of behavior because it doesn't work. It's not effective. You're not going to get him. Like he said, oh, no, he's not going to be ready for it. What do you think? He's just going to spill, because some, random person comes up to him with taping him on a cell phone and fires some truther questions or Republican questions at him or whatever, right? Like, it's just the behaviors don't work, right? That's why I said I don't, try to interact with these people personally, but I tell the truth here about them, right? If they come and watch my videos, that's on them. I'm not, making them for them, but the truth is there. Like, they could listen to it or not, right? There's a way that they could benefit from it because, it's being told, whether it sounds harsh or whether it sounds whatever, it's still a level of the truth, and certainly, something that they at some point need to change. Like, it's, they're going in the wrong direction. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.